This is a continuation of a series I began a few years ago, in which I take a look at discoveries from different periods of time which were found under very different circumstances in one geographical region. The first three cases will appeal more to the true crime fans, while the last two are archaeological and paleontological finds and will appeal more to the traditional history fans. That being said, I'll bring you 5 discoveries unearthed in the state of New York. It was May 24, 1981, when 2 children playing in a vacant lot in Lindenwood, Queens, found a hand protruding from the earth. The decomposing body was identified through his clothing and personal items as Alphonse Indelicato, a mob captain known as Sonny Red from the Bonanno crime family. Some believe that this story of children finding the body of Indelicato was actually fabricated to protect an informant who tipped off law enforcement about the location of the body. Whatever the case may be, Indelicato was one of 3 mafia captains gunned down 3 weeks earlier, a hit that would become known as the Three Capos murders. Despite further excavations in 1981, no remains were found of the other 2 men. But in 2004, following the confession of a major mob boss, backhoe excavators and FBI agents once again descended on the area to take a closer look. What they found would reveal answers to a 23-year-old mystery. The story leading up to the gangland killings on May 5, 1981 is a long and intriguing one, and has been the subject of various documentaries and films. So in short, these men were shot dead at a Brooklyn social club by other members of the Bonanno family, because it was believed that Dominic Trinchera, Philip Giacone, and the now unearthed Alphonse Indelicato were plotting to take over leadership of the family. The Bonanno clan boss, Joseph Messino, was thought to have ordered the killings, but it took the FBI more than 20 years to bring him to justice. At his eventual trial in 2004, which also included charges for other murders and racketeering, other former mob bosses said that he had indeed ordered the hit. The disposal of the bodies was also arranged by Messino, but involved members of the notorious Gambino family, headed by John Gotti. On July 30, 2004, Joseph Messino was convicted of murder, but unlike many mob bosses before him, he did not practice a code of silence. With the understanding that he would receive a reduced sentence, he confessed his involvement in the killings and revealed the location of the bodies. Unsurprisingly, it was the same location that Alphonse Sonny Red Indelicato was found in 1981. In October of 2004, despite a struggle with the heavily waterlogged ground, human bones including a skull were raised from the earth, along with a jacket, a watch and a 23-year-old bank card. 2 months later, the remains were positively identified as belonging to Dominic Trinchera and Philip Giacone, when DNA from the bones were compared to samples taken from the men's families. After 23 years in the ground, the one skull found by the FBI still showed clear signs of a gunshot wound. It was initially thought that the site could also yield the remains of 51-year-old John Favara, who killed John Gotti's 12-year-old son Frank in a road accident in Howard Beach, New York in 1980. Favara received no charges and went missing 5 months later. However, recent reports state that Favara was likely to have been put into a barrel of cement and discarded at sea, or dissolved in a vat of acid. This house stands on Olive Street in Lake Grove, Long Island. It's the home of Michael and Steve Carroll, who grew up here with their mother and 2 older sisters. Their father, George Carroll, bought the house in 1955 and lived there with his family for the next 6 years. Then in 1961, when Steve was 5 years old, his sisters 7 and 9, and his brother Michael was only 8 months, their father inexplicably disappeared without a trace. Mother Dorothy Carroll told the children that their father, a veteran of the Korean War, had left the family home with no explanation. This is a story they were told, and at the time had been accepted. But as the years went by and the Carroll children became adults, they all began to question their mother's story. In 1993, Dorothy Carroll sold the house to her youngest son Michael. Then in 1998 she passed away, taking with her, it seemed, any chance of the siblings finding out the truth about their father. There were various theories spoken about over the years. Among them was the possibility that George Carroll was murdered and buried beneath the house, but this hunch wasn't strong enough within the family to justify an excavation. So with no leads to go on, the Carroll family remained in limbo. Over the years, strange happenings and alleged ghost sightings within the house were common enough for Michael to hire psychic mediums and ghost hunters, but these efforts shed no light on the mystery. A few years ago, finally acting on a belief that he held for many years that his father was underneath the house, Michael Carroll finally began an excavation of the basement. But the work was cut short because it was deemed too dangerous. Michael subsequently suffered a stroke and the project was shelved. But his sons, Christopher and Michael Jr., took control of the operation in 2018. They hired a ground radar expert to check for irregularities beneath the house. After a specific area of the basement was pointed out, the new excavation was underway. It lasted for months, but then on October 30th, 6 to 8 feet below the basement floor and covered in cinder blocks, the skeletal remains of a person was found. As police began their investigation, the remains were taken for analysis. DNA was extracted from the bones, and in December of 2018, it was proven beyond doubt that they belonged to George Carroll. The Korean War veteran and father of 4 had been lying beneath his own house while his children and grandchildren lived out their lives above him for 57 years. After this revelation, Michael Carroll said that he wasn't surprised at the discovery and always believed that his father was in the basement. Steve Carroll, now 62, told the News 4 network, "We felt abandoned as kids, but he was here the whole time." The family never filed any missing persons report, and the police say that there is no record of their involvement in George's disappearance. But the story doesn't end there. It's believed that fractures found in the skull were likely caused by blunt force trauma, meaning that the case was now a homicide investigation. Michael Carroll said that there was a man whom he thought had been involved in his father's death. His name was Richard Duress, and he was the man Dorothy Carroll subsequently married. Richard Duress and Dorothy Carroll had divorced in 1983. Duress had since moved to Mexico, but died in June of 2018 at the age of 77, in a care home in Laredo, Texas. The Northern State Parkway is a 29-mile-long road, which runs from Queens east side through Nassau County and beyond. In March of 2004, it was at this location, just outside the eastern border of Nassau County, that a young woman named Jennifer Willis lost control of her car and veered into the central reservation of the parkway. Fortunately, she and her 3-year-old son were unharmed, and the sedan she was driving came to rest on bramble bushes. She had no cell phone, so no way of contacting her husband. In a desperate attempt to seek help, she stepped out of the car onto a hard surface, and something that fell out of place. Her car had disturbed a shallow layer of dead leaves, and when she looked down, she saw a human skull resting in the earth. Within a few hours, investigators from the New York State Police had uncovered a fully clothed skeleton, partially placed within a plastic bag. They soon confirmed that it was a skeleton of a man, but how he came to be at the location and for how long would be questions requiring a more thorough investigation. There was no identification found at the scene, but one of the key clues was a 1980s members-only jacket. Further investigation into the jacket's origin initially suggested that it was made in Sri Lanka and had been manufactured in 1982. The skeleton was also wearing a striped button shirt, 1970s bell bottoms, and a Bulova watch manufactured by the Queens-based company in 1960, and at the time held a hefty price tag of $500. Coins were found in his pocket along with an empty money clip emblazoned with the logo of a New York City oil company, Paragon Oil. As the newest coin was dated 1974, police decided that the death could have occurred earlier than 1982, which was the original estimate based on the age of the jacket. They decided not to trust the given manufacture date and concentrated on another key piece of information: the man's height. His unusually small stature of 5'1" meant that at first investigators thought they were dealing with the body of a child, but dental analysis concluded that he was actually between 35 and 55 years old. Because 2 racecourses lie within 30 miles of where the body was found, it was surmised that he could have been a jockey, but on investigation no jockeys had been reported missing in either New York or New Jersey, and the Paragon Oil Company confirmed that they had never employed anyone matching his description. The case was reopened in 2013, but detectives are still at a loss as to how the body got there, or if anyone had in fact killed the man and dumped him. Based on the skull, computer-generated reconstructions of the face were made, along with a request to the public for any information. At the time of the find, the medical examiner believed that it was a Caucasian male with high cheekbones, dark hair, and a slightly dark complexion. But on further investigation in 2013, law enforcement say that they are no longer sure. A 1970s style afro comb was found in his pocket, and the reconstructions depict both curly and straight hair. Senior investigator Thomas Hughes said in 2013, "We want to identify him to give somebody somewhere closure. Maybe there's a kid out there who wants to know what happened to his father." The man's height is still thought to be an important factor. As he was shorter than 99% of the male population in North America, this could be the key to his identity. But 15 years on from the discovery, and at least 35 years since the estimated time of death, the identity of the corpse, in what would become known as the members-only case, is still unknown. There were no dental records on file, and DNA analysis had been inconclusive according to 2013 reports. There has been no update since, as far as I can see. The last word on the case that I could find is a quote from senior investigator Thomas Hughes, after police said that they would be concentrating on the borough of Queens. He said, "Back then, missing persons cases were filed and put in a box. We'll literally be looking through warehouses full of boxes in Queens." As an interesting epilogue to this story, 4 years before Jennifer Willis found the unnamed man on the Northern State Parkway, another male body was found in similar circumstances 8 miles east near Dix Hills. He too was wrapped in a plastic bag. He lay 50 yards from the busy highway and had been shot 5 times in the head and torso. Despite having been dead for no more than 2 months, he too remains unidentified. Could the same killer or killers, still active decades later, have been responsible? In the summer of 2010, at the former site of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, 9 years after the events of September the 11th, excavators were carrying out work to build an underground parking lot, when 22 feet below the street's surface, the rotting hull of a wooden ship was exposed. The 230-year-old vessel was a kind of sailing boat known as a sloop, a Dutch-designed craft used to carry cargo and passengers in shallow water, and was likely to be constructed in a Philadelphia shipyard in the 1770s. But for reasons unknown, its years of service were likely to have been no more than a decade or two, because it had become part of the landfill to extend the shores of the Hudson River to make more room in the flourishing city. This extending of the land happened in the 1790s. Signs of woodworm infestation in the ship was noticed, so this is a possible explanation for the vessel's short lifespan. So how did experts come to the conclusion that the ship was from the Revolutionary era? Well, it took 4 years, but a scientist named James Cook from Columbia University in New York said, What determined the exactness of the construction date of the ship was the use of tree ring dating, which was made possible by recovering timber from the ship. It's an old, well-known method. Each year a new ring is added to the trunk, and the thickness of the ring depends on how well the tree grew over that year. The 32-foot ship was made of wood from hickory, spruce, pine and oak, but the study to find its age lay within the oak used to build the ship's hull. Based on tree ring sequences already on record, the same pattern of growth was found in white oak trees from a forest in southeastern Pennsylvania. Philadelphia was considered one of the most important cities in the world for ship construction, so it's believed that this was its birthplace. The fact that the city's Independence Hall and other 18th century buildings in the area were constructed using the wood harvested from the same area backs up this theory. According to James Cook and his colleagues, the oldest ring dated as far back as the 1400s, and the youngest, more specifically, to 1773. Based on this information, and making a fair assumption that the wood was used to construct the ship soon after it was harvested, the ship's year of construction was given. After being excavated, it was taken to the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Laboratory and later preserved at the A&M University in College Station, Texas. The mastodon is an extinct species distantly related to the elephant, who once inhabited parts of North and Central America, and is said to have died out 10,000 to 11,000 years ago. The state of New York, over the decades, has revealed a number of mastodon remains. Any of these accounts are worth covering here, but I chose the discovery of the near-complete skeleton of the Harriman mastodon, unearthed in 1952. This is Route 17M, leading into Harriman, Orange County. Just off this road, almost 70 years ago, the remains of a very large animal were uncovered during the widening of a drainage ditch, on land owned by a Mrs. Edith Lustron. The original hand-dug ditches were being replaced using a gasoline-driven shovel. The animal's remains were so close to the surface of the earth that the digger easily drew out half a jawbone, a leg bone and a number of ribs. They were initially taken by the workmen to Ardman House, a mansion in Harriman used by Columbia University, but after little interest was shown, the men returned home to nearby Warwick with the bones. It was then that newspaper The Warwick Dispatch caught wind of the discovery, photographed the findings and published a short article. In the days following the Warwick Dispatch coverage, interest grew. It was then that a Mr. W. E. Fish was sent from the National History Museum of America in New York City to lead an extensive excavation of the site. Word of the museum's involvement spread quickly, and people, particularly the local children, began to arrive at the site in hope of digging up a souvenir. The excavation site, although guarded, was breached, and bones went missing, but in a desperate retrieval operation, most of them were found, in people's homes, workmen's cars, and even antique shops in New York City. Eventually the remains of a near-complete mastodon were unearthed at a depth of only 4 feet. It was reported that some of the children managed to take away smaller bones, hiding them in bushes, taking them home or selling them. Mastodon bones are nothing new to the Orange County area, but until 1952 the remains were often scattered, making a reconstruction of a full skeleton near impossible. A brief history of the exhumation of the Harriman mastodon, written in 1957 by R. W. Smith, who was present at the exhumation, explains why this particular specimen was kept so well intact. His writing explains that when the last glacial period ended around 11 to 12,000 years ago, the ice cap shifted over time, moving the mastodon bones with it. But this mastodon died in a 25 to 30 square foot area of low ground, surrounded by higher ground which protected it from the glacial shifts. The animal was reconstructed at the Natural History Museum of America, and now stands 8 feet tall and 13.5 feet wide, at the museum village in the Orange County town of Monroe. The story of the Harriman mastodon has become a well-known part of the area's history, and you don't need to look far for information. But 3 weeks before the Mastodon find, another discovery was made in very similar circumstances in the same area, although the story behind this prehistoric animal doesn't appear to be as widely remembered. On Wednesday, May 28th, a report of a discovery of fossilised dinosaur bones in Harriman was printed in Michigan newspaper Escanaba Daily Press. Like the Mastodon, it was unearthed during the widening of a drainage ditch, using the same kind of digger, operated by the same man, John Lineweaver. Among the bones found were the jawbone, leg bones and ribs. Scientists concluded that the bones belonged to an Anchisaurus and estimated its age to be at least 150 million years. I'm sure at the time the story was more widely publicised, but I found existing reports scarce. I know that the story did find its way across the Atlantic a few days later, because on May 30th, 1952, a brief story was also printed in English newspaper The Sunderland Echo.